On February 17, 1972, Billie Joe Armstrong was born in Rodeo, California. Billie was raised in a musical environment because his mother shared Andy Armstrong's passion for dancing and music, and his father was a jazz drummer. The drums were among the instruments that Billie Joe and his siblings were always encouraged to learn to play. In Oakland, California, on May 4, 1972, Michael Ryan Pritchard was born. Soon after his birth, his mother gave him up for adoption due to her severe heroin addiction. Cheryl Nasser and Patrick Pritchard adopted Michael legally when he was 6 weeks old after taking care of him as a foster child. When his parents separated when he was 7, Mike briefly remained with his father before moving to Rodeo, California to be with his mother and sister Michaela. When Billie Joe and Mike first met at Carquinez Middle School when they were 10 years old, they connected right away. I believe they just let each other be who they are. Billie started teaching Mike how to play the guitar shortly after, and he took it up quite quickly. The two started off by improvising, which evolved into serious songwriting sessions that made them a tight unit even before they had any rhythm section. The brothers added drummer pal Sean Hughes by the time they were in the 9th grade. The whole band transferred to Pinole Valley High School by the 11th grade. Additionally, they had the moniker Sweet Children. When Billie Joe and Mike originally tried to schedule performances at Gilman, they frequently failed to secure even the smallest spot on the schedule. Their demo tapes were disregarded as being insufficiently punk. When they hung over John Kiffmeyer, often known as Al Sobrante, to join their band as a drummer in 1987, things took a turn for the better. The success that Sobrante had achieved as the drummer for the well-known punk band Isocracy in their hometown was a turning point in the young career of Sweet Children. They scheduled a warm-up performance at Rod's Hickory Pit, the restaurant where Billie Joe's mother worked, prior to their first appearance at Gilman in 1987. This performance effectively spread their brand, and many audience members were impressed by the caliber of punk the young band produced. As the band gained popularity, influential players in the Bay Area music scene started to pay them attention. At a home party where they had performed, they met Larry Livermore, the owner of Lookout Records, who was immediately enthralled. The band traveled 200 miles to perform for about 5 bored adolescents in a frigid mountain lodge, yet they still managed to pull it off like they were the Beatles at Shea Stadium. The band joined the label shortly after meeting him, and they started to issue EPs. Sweet Children spontaneously decided to alter their name to Green Day just before their debut album, 1000 Hours, was released in 1989. This decision was motivated by a song that Billie had written for the record. The band recorded their first full-length album, 39, Smooth, in 1989. This was followed by a second EP, Slappy, which was released in the summer of 1990. The album 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours, a combination of all 3 albums, was released. The record generated a lot of attention in the Gilman movement, and in June 1990, Green Day left for their first U.S. tour, which coincided with Mike's high school graduation. While the band was based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, many of the performances were to sparse crowds, and others were only at a single person's home. Kiffmeyer broke the devastating news that he would be leaving for college after their first tour. Until Billie jammed with Tré Cool, the former drummer for the Lookouts, Billie and Mike were worried about the band's future. In November 1990, Tré joined Billie and Mike for a performance, and things progressed from there. Tré was a challenge, but he was a great drummer and a dependable pick for a band looking for consistency. The new group cut Kerplunk, their second full-length for Lookout Records, in the spring of 1991. Green Day's signature pop-punk melodic quality first appeared on this album, which was well received by audiences all over the nation. The band started packing venues on the Kerplunk tours that they had previously been unable to book. They even started to make enough money to purchase new equipment and a bookmobile that had been modified for traveling. With this record, the band even made an international trip to Europe. Their record company was astounded by the popularity. Kerplunk was selling out everywhere, and cities where 50 kids had previously watched the guys perform would have 300 when they returned. After speaking with a number of labels, they ultimately found their match in Rob Cavallo and Reprise Records. In the summer of 1993, Green Day signed with Reprise, a Warner Brothers subsidiary. On September 23 of that year, they performed at Gilman Street for the final time. The band would be welcomed there for the final time in over a decade after this. The band started working on their third album, Dookie, shortly after signing with Reprise. The album was recorded in 3 weeks, although there was significant friction between the band and their management during the mixing and producing process because they had never before received such harsh criticism. All parties eventually resolved their differences, and mixing was completed in late 1993. Kurt Cobain sadly committed suicide just days after the album's debut, which led to the collapse of the grunge scene. The fact that Green Day's debut album, Dookie, sold out within minutes of its release on February 1, 1994, indicates the significance of their influence on the music industry. They were the new, albeit improbable, heroes of a rock scene that was in grief. With 17 million copies sold to date, this, along with appealing songs that worked well on college radio and commercial radio, helped make one of the biggest albums of the decade. Although they were adored by the general public and frequently appeared on MTV, magazine covers, and significant tours like the Woodstock Revival, the East Bay punks who gave them their start did not appreciate their success. They were listed on Gilman Street's official blacklist of bands that were never allowed to perform at the venue again after being called sellouts by local punk zines. After Dookie's release, Billie Joe once broke into the club after hours and discovered "Billie Joe Must Die" carved into the toilet wall. The band was deeply affected by losing the neighborhood where they had grown up, but they persisted, and they went on to experience both the success of their first album and success in their personal lives. Insomniac, the group's follow-up album, was released on October 10, 1995, without any delay. Given the band's inability to escape their newfound stardom, it was evident that it was the most anticipated rock album of that year. By adopting a darker edge with Insomniac, they wanted to rebel against everything that had made them renowned. Although the album went platinum, debuted at number 2 US chart, and spawned singles that received significant airplay, it would never achieve the same level of popularity as Dookie. The band started to seriously consider how their conflicting lives as punk rock stars and family guys would and should affect their future record after the upheaval of the Insomniac era. They came to the conclusion that it was time to move beyond the 3-chord pop-punk songs that had previously limited and defined them. They worked in the studio for 4 solid months in 1997, recording these brand new songs, before releasing Nimrod on October 14. The angry send-off song, Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, which was played everywhere from high school graduations to the Seinfeld series finale, was primarily responsible for the album reaching number 2 on the Billboard Top 200. The most punk thing we could have done was to include that song on the album. Green Day started writing their 6th full-length album, Warning, with these emotions in mind. They had been a band for more than 10 years when they decided to change their course to avoid becoming stale. The album had various acoustic pieces, some of which had a grassroots feel. This was in contrast to the slight taste of difference that could be sensed in Nimrod's numerous creative choices. Hold On song. According to reports, Billie Joe drew heavily on the folky protest songs on Bob Dylan's 1964 album, bringing it all back home as inspiration for this album. The band put out 2 albums of older material between the release of Warning and American Idiot. In November 2001, the band's best hits and music videos were compiled on the album's International Superhits and International Supervideos. Green Day returned to the studio in November 2003 to create an album titled Cigarettes and Valentines. The finished songs, which would be mastered during their next session, were left behind as they departed the studio one evening. The masters had all been stolen when they returned, therefore no one had ever heard any of the songs before the 2010 North American tour. The band made the decision to sit down and write something better and more ambitious, which would ultimately become American Idiot, rather than re-recording the stolen tracks. On September 21, 2004, American Idiot debuted at the top of the charts. The first indication that Green Day were back in action was this. Additionally, the album took home 7 of the 8 Video Music Awards for which it was nominated in 2005, as well as the Grammy Award for Best Rock Album. The Grammy Award for Best Rock Record in 2006 went to Boulevard of Broken Dreams. The band's global invasion may have peaked with the American Idiot tours, which began on October 1, 2004. The band later released a live CD/DVD that was recorded at the Milton Keynes National Bowl in England on July 18 and 19, 2005, to celebrate the enormous success of this album and tour. Green Day performed in the biggest venue they had ever played. The band covered John Lennon's Working Class Hero in June 2007 for the charity CD Instant Karma, the proceeds of which were donated to the Darfur conflict. The sideband embarked on a brief club tour of the West and Southwest regions of North America in the summer of 2008 after releasing a full album titled Stop, Drop, and Roll in May of that year. In May 2009, 21st Century Breakdown has released. It was also a rock opera with a theme that was reminiscent of American Idiot. The new album had a strong chart debut, received favorable reviews, and went on to win multiple Video Music Awards and the Grammy Award for Best Rock Album in 2010. However, it wasn't quite as popular as American Idiot. Green Day gave numerous interviews in the summer of 2012, just before the release of the 3 new albums, Uno, Dos, Tres. Fans learned more about the 3 historic albums they may look forward to. 2 movies on the making of the trilogy and 1 using pre-Dookie archival video would soon be published, according to the band. In order to promote the trilogy albums and make up some of the cancelled 2012 performances, Green Day would go on to perform more than 50 shows in 2013 and 2014. Green Day was admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, in April 2015. 2 days before their induction, the band performed a surprise concert. In 2016 and 2020, the band released a new album, Revolution Radio, released on October 7, 2016. The album topped the Billboard 200. It was followed by the release of the album Father of All Motherf? On February 7, 2020. The album reached number 4 on the Billboard 200, and number 1 in the US Top Rock Albums.